Hey there, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for being here. Well, it's time for another Tools and Tech Tuesday, and today I thought we would talk about the Tesla bot. There were some pretty strong feelings, and there was even some misinformation, even from a source that I used to respect a lot. I liked a lot of what Marques Brownlee had to say, even though I disagreed with something that he said. Let's talk about it. Real quick, in case you didn't know about it, Tesla announced a robot that they plan to release in the future. You can see that it stands 5 foot 8 inches tall, it's 125 pounds, has a max speed of 5 miles per hour, carrying capacity of 45 pounds, deadlift of 150 pounds, and an arm extended length carrying capacity of 10 pounds. There was some misinformation out there, including some from sources that apparently didn't even watch the presentation. One source said that the chief executive officer came out on stage dancing around in a robot suit, even though Elon was clearly on stage for part of the time that this person in the suit was on stage, and Elon did say that it was fake. So let's skip right by the people that clearly didn't even watch the presentation. One source that may have watched the presentation, but I totally disagreed with a lot of the things that they said, was Engadget. I used to love Engadget and I used to trust their content. But unfortunately, this video was very much skewed and seemed like a really bad hit piece. The author seemed like they must have a vendetta against Elon. I want to clear something up real quick, and that is that the author of this Engadget piece said that Elon was throwing out red meat for his defenders. I like Elon, I think he does a lot of great stuff, I agree with him on a lot of things, but I'm not just a fanboy who blindly accepts everything that he has to say. If you guys have watched my videos and followed me on social media, you'll know that I'm not a defender. I'm not a fanboy of Tesla or Elon or any of his companies. I've spoken out publicly about some of the things that I disagree with him on. I disagree with him on some of the details on climate change. I also disagree with him on some other things related to the environment, such as desalinization. A while back, Elon was tweeting about how desalinization is not expensive. Granted, my degree in earth science is pretty old at this point, but I went and did some research just to make sure and see if my information was just old and if things have changed. From what I can tell, desalinization is still prohibitively expensive on the scale that we need it. So I'm not just some fanboy that doesn't question anything that Elon has to say. The Engadget author ridicules Musk for different things. He talks about the fact that Elon talked about robo-taxis coming in 2020. There wasn't anything weird about 2020 that could change plans, was there? He talks about autopilot wrecks and mentions that there's 11, but he neglects to mention how many wrecks there are in general. If you believe the stats from companies like AAA and also from the federal government, then statistically speaking, the crashes per mile driven while using autopilot is pretty low compared to the general crashes per mile driven. He also misquotes Elon saying that the Cybertruck is supposedly indestructible. Elon never claimed that the Cybertruck was indestructible. I don't know if the author was being dishonest or if they just hadn't bothered to do the research, but he doesn't mention Elon's reasoning as to why the glass may have cracked in the Cybertruck. Elon said in an interview that they were doing that all day long, and this was the first time that the ball broke the window. Now maybe the author doesn't believe Elon, but he should at least mention it and say that he doesn't believe him. Instead, he just omits it altogether. He uses words and phrases to lead the consumer into thinking a certain way, such as Elon did something smugly, or saying that the ventilators were cobbled together. He says that the ventilators that Tesla showed off were more like CPAP machines for sleep apnea than like ventilators at a hospital. I have a CPAP machine, and I had an older CPAP machine before it, and I've also seen different models of CPAP machines, and I've never seen one that looked anything like what Tesla showed off in that video. CPAP stands for Continuous Positive Airway Pressure. When you see something in the video that looks like bellows, that's pushing the air intermittently, not continuously, like a CPAP would. He also just resorts to name-calling, calling Elon a carnival barker. If you ask me, when you have to resort to name-calling, that just weakens your argument. I thought that the piece was very skewed, but you can watch it for yourself and decide. Let's move on from the Engadget video and talk about some other things that I saw online. I saw some tweets of people thinking that this Tesla bot will distract from Tesla's mission statement. Well, technically, I can see how this directly would look like it would, but it could actually help their mission statement. Here's why I think that. Elon says that they would be reusing much of the software and hardware that they use in the Teslas. I could definitely see how if they made this Tesla bot cheap enough, it could get more people interested in developing AI. Just like SpaceX and Blue Origin has reignited some more interest in space exploration. Tesla's mission is to help us move towards more sustainable transport. They obviously feel like a big part of doing that is developing self-driving technology. In order to develop the self-driving technology, it's basically AI, so they need to develop AI. So if this Tesla bot gets more people interested and gives them access to developing AI, it could lead to advancements in the AI for the self-driving, which could help sell more Teslas and in turn move us towards more sustainable transport. I also watched a video from Marques Brownlee, who I really like, and he made some really good points. Like, I agree with him how he said he can see how Elon was saying how the Teslas are basically at this point robots on wheels. One thing that I kind of disagree with him on is he said that the human form factor is not very efficient. While that is technically true for a lot of very specific tasks, our human bodies are good at navigating this world that we've built and doing a variety of different tasks in that world. While the machine at a factory is very good at repeatedly doing a task very precisely and quickly, they're also pretty expensive. He gives the example of making your bed. Even if they got that robot down to a few $100s, I can't imagine that people would end up buying it. Because you'd have to buy that robot and then a robot that does your dishes and a robot that does whatever else. You'd have to buy a robot for each individual task. And sure, people do buy robotic vacuums, but they don't buy as many as they do just dumb vacuums that they push around themselves. If you want to make a robot commercially successful, in my opinion, you have to make it economically efficient. Think of all the things that your smartphone replaces from just a few decades ago. If you wanted the same functionality that you carry around in your pocket with your smartphone a few decades ago, you would have had to bought a whole bunch of different things. Depending on when it was, you might buy a Discman or a Walkman. You'd have a camera, a calculator, a laptop, a GPS, a compass, a level, a measuring tape, books. You would have so much stuff you probably wouldn't be able to carry it all, and it would have been a lot more expensive. Imagine if, just like computers and smartphones, became a platform to be able to use those items for a ton of different things. If we could do the same thing with a robot, you could see how people or small companies that can't afford to build a robot for one specific task and sell it might be able to develop a little bit of software.
Because building factories, buying machines, and paying people to run those machines all gets to be pretty expensive, while coding can be done on a laptop.
Maybe it could even be traditional software where everything has to be written in just for a starting point, and then the AI can learn from that starting point. A smaller contractor building houses probably wouldn't be able to compete with larger companies that could afford to buy a bunch of individual robots. But they might be able to afford a more versatile robot that can do different things. The robot could flip the breaker on and off for an electrician who's on the other side of the house testing something, so they don't have to run back and forth. The robot could potentially tie rebar. Maybe they buy it with an app that gives it the ability to mix and pour cement and then smooth out the driveway. Then when the contractor is ready to spend a little more money, they buy another app that allows it to install tile or something. I could also see it being useful in our personal lives. While I can go get a robotic vacuum for about $300 right now, If I really want a good one, I'm going to spend more than double that. I already have a vacuum, I already have a lawnmower, I already have a bunch of different things. Why would I want to go spend $600 or $700 on a robotic vacuum, a couple thousand on a robotic lawnmower, and who knows what on all these other different possible robots that could come out? Since they're reusing so many parts that are fairly inexpensive, they may be able to sell this robot for a few $1,000s. If I could buy a robot for a few $1,000s, and then buy or subscribe to apps that would give it different abilities, such as making my bed, doing my dishes, sweeping, mopping, cutting the grass, carrying some groceries, that's more appealing to me because hopefully over time, just like the smartphone and the computer, those things have become more and more democratized. And this could create a whole app economy around this robot, just like apps on a smartphone. To be clear, I'm not saying that there couldn't be or shouldn't be attachments that could go along with the apps for this robot to make it doing certain tasks more efficient. I'm just saying that when you have to buy a whole new robot for each individual task, that could get to be very expensive for the end consumer. I also think that making a brand new robot from scratch, hardware and software, makes the process more expensive and makes a bigger barrier to entry for companies to get into the market.
I also think that it's likely that we'll continue to see task-specific robots for quite some time, but they'll be mixed in with generalized robots.
I can see two potentially huge downsides to making robots. First, I think that there's still a threat economically. Proponents of automation say that automation creates new jobs, and while traditionally that has been true, but what happens when eventually every single job can be automated? Really what's happened over time historically is that jobs have just shifted to one place to another. What happens when there's no other place to shift to? The second downside that I see is that I think that there's still a potential threat physically. Sure, they can only run 5 miles an hour and they'll be limited to how much they can lift, but who's to say that they won't be able to go in your garage and upgrade themselves overnight? Or maybe a group of robots is able to order the parts from a place like Amazon and make a whole army of upgraded robots somewhere. But just like any tool or tech, it can be used for good or bad. Ultimately, I think it's inevitable. If Tesla doesn't make them, someone else will. And I'm personally more excited about the possibilities of them helping us in our regular lives, helping people with disabilities, and just all the good things that could come of this. So, to answer the main question, after seeing all the tweets saying that it's a dumb idea or it's a bad idea, what do I think? Was it a bad idea to announce Tesla Bot? I don't think it was. I think if they do it right, they could get more people interested in developing AI and further their mission. And I do understand that there are some downsides or dangers involved, but I think the potential for good outweighs those potential dangers or downsides. Drop me a line in the comments, I'd love to hear what you think. Do me a favor, give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down to let me know if you like the video or not. And if you have the time, let me know in the comments why or why not. I hope you found my take interesting. If you know anyone who might be interested, I hope you share this video with them. And I know I say it all the time, but I really mean it. Thank you so much for watching the video, and I'll see you next time. Hey there, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for being here. Well, there's some misinformation. One source even said that the chief... One source said that the chief executive officer came out... If you believe the stats... If you believe the stats from companies like AAA and groups in the federal government, then also from the federal government, then statistically speaking, The miles per Tesla made were more like CPAP machines for sleep apnea. He also just resorts to name calling Elon. Oh, my stomach's growling too. Wait for the motorcycle to go by. Well, I can go get a robot. I'm just saying that buying a new robot for each individual task overall could be good. CPAP stands for